Welcome to Listening for Direction, the development and optimization of workplace mental wellness programs for men. Today's webinar is co-hosted by the Institute for Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention, UBC Okanagan campus. We're glad you're here. My name is Angie Hunt, Project Manager with the Work Wellness and Disability Prevention Institute, formerly known as the Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. This webinar is made possible through the support of the Community Gaming Grant Program through the BC government, as well as donations and memberships to WWDPI. While we're waiting for others to join us, I'll go over a few technical points for the webinar. You should be able to hear the presentation through your computer speakers or through the conference call line if you dialed in. Please use the question box to submit any issues you may be experiencing and to ask any questions you have related to the presentation. We will collect questions submitted throughout the presentation and follow the presentation with a Q&A based on the questions submitted. Following the webinar, any questions not answered in the allotted time will be answered and distributed after the event. The presentation will be recorded and posted for free on our website within a week along with the slides. You will be emailed the direct links for all of these items when they are available. As I mentioned, my name is Angie and I'll be moderating the webinar and Q&A session. Our presenters today are Cherise Seaton and John Olive. Dr. Cherise Seaton holds a PhD in psychology and is a research coordinator for the Men's Healthy Eating and Active Living Project at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan campus, and an adjunct professor at the University of Northern British Columbia. She was a co-principal investigator of the Heads Up Project, developing a new program designed to promote mental well-being in male-dominated workplaces. Dr. John Olive is a professor at the School of Nursing at the University of British Columbia, founder and lead investigator of UBC Men's Health Research Program. His work focuses on masculinities as it influences men's health behaviors and illness management, and its impact on partners, families, and overall life quality. Findings drawn from his research offer guidance to clinicians and researchers to advance men's health promotion in the areas of psychological prostate cancer care, smoking cessation, and male suicide prevention. And now I'll hand the presentation over to John.
Great, thanks Angie, and a special thanks to Cherise for including me on this presentation. She's the lead on this work, the Heads Up work, which is part of the POWERPLAY work, and I'll explain the connection. But just a shout out to the funding from the Health Research in Northern BC, the SEED grant program, and jointly for UNBC, Northern Health and Provincial Health Services Authority, as well as the Canadian Cancer Society. We've been very, very fortunate to be able to do this work as an add-on, but a very important add-on. When we talk about mental health and mental illness within the workplace, the numbers are quite staggering. You know, in Canada, more than 500,000 employees are unable to work in any given week due to a mental illness. And we also know that 1 in 3 disability claims is related to mental illness, and 70% of the disability claims are now related to mental illness. It's an emergent problem, and of course the wellness workplace initiatives are well situated to help to deal with some of this emerging trend in terms of mental illness within a workplace. In terms of gender, it is very interesting. We often talk about a discordant relationship in relation to men's depression and suicide, and by that I mean that men are diagnosed with depression at half the rate of women, but they suicide at 3 to 4 times the rate of women. And I'm not suggesting that the only route to suicide is depression, but we do know that severe depression is one of the biggest risk factors. So again, we're trying to really get upstream and think about, you know, how we can intervene at a point to help men better address their mental illness and mental health pieces. There's a few things that are at the back of this. You know, there's been a long rhetoric about some men being reticent to access healthcare services, and I think in the context of mental healthcare services, there's still a lot of stigma around that drives some stoicism and some ideals about, you know, being self-reliant and managing your own mental health. So I think that does disenfranchise a lot of men. Research also points out that masculine ideals might be especially normed and policed in northern and rural settings, which is the spot that we're talking about today in terms of the Heads Up. one other thing I'd throw out is that, you know, with men, oftentimes we see externalizing of symptoms, such as irritability, anger, alcohol overuse. And we're not necessarily seeing those as generic depressive symptoms, but we're increasingly seeing them early on in men. So in that respect, you know, it kind of sets it up that guys may well present differently with depression, and also many of these men are in the workplace. In fact, I was reading an article the other day that suggested that 75% of the male suicides that occur in Canada are amongst men who are at work or employed. So the idea about reaching men, we know that also 75% of the Canadian men are in paid work, so it's an interesting spot. But there's 4 million of them that are involved in the resource sector, including mining, construction, forestry, along with transportation and warehousing. So they're a group that often might be considered hard to reach, or might have some unique needs. Because when you look at workplace wellness programs, they tend to focus on office workers, and even things like cell phones and sending texts out and emails about coaching folks in terms of health might not be applicable to guys working in these industries who might not be able to carry cell phones, who might not be in front of a computer. So again, it just raises that possibility that we need to think creatively about attaching ourselves, you know, to these industries in a way that can help drive, you know, positive health promotion, mental health promotion in the men in those male-dominated industries. I think it's interesting too that being male-dominated industries, there's certain tropes of masculinity, certain cultural ideals about how the work is done that we need to engage with, and increasingly our work in men's health suggests that you're far better to work with some of those norms to try and get some transitions rather than to go in expressively looking to change the norms. So in terms of situating the Heads Up Guys piece, just to say it's part of an award-winning program called POWERPLAY. We've been working on this project for 4 years, and Charisse has been heading it up, and it's involved a collaboration between Northern Health, BC Cancer Agency and Canadian Cancer Society, along with researchers from UBC, FASCA, Workplace Wellness. So it's been a collaborative program, and it's lovely to have a website where we've had lots of traffic and lots of traction, and a program that's won many awards to be able to insert this piece around, you know, explicitly men's mental health. When we polled guys, you know, in these different industries that I mentioned, things such as trucking, mining, chemical manufacturing, shipping, and municipal public sector, we polled them about, you know, what was of interest to them, and it is interesting that guys are interested in health, you know, and certainly the POWERPLAY program focused very much on physical activity and healthy eating. But you can see that there is an interest around managing stress, and I think we were wise to poll them around such a thing as managing stress, because it's often what guys talk to us about. Even when guys arrive in clinical practice, oftentimes they won't talk about depressive symptoms, they'll talk about stress. And so again, just trying to understand what their interest might be around managing stress, it's kind of a proactive term. So that 85% of the guys polled were interested in it, you know, gave us a good segue, a good idea about, you know, developing some content that would explicitly get into some of those areas. I guess, you know, in terms of academic traditions, what we typically do is we scope a review of the literature to get a sense of what's out there and what's been done. And then Charisse will talk to the second phase, which is, you know, getting input from men and workplace representatives, and then a third phase where you kind of design the program and you roll it out, and Charisse likewise will talk to that. So I'll talk to phase one briefly here, just to give you a bit of a sense of the empirical background that kind of informs some of our thinking, just to, you know, in terms of thinking about, you know, what's been done and how we would want to think about it. This scoping review, we kind of focused on mental health promotion, you know, interventions for men, and you can see the full citation there, and that one's freely available online with all of the details, and I'll just give you a bit of an overview of it. we looked at all the studies evaluating programs designed to reduce stress or promote mental health. And these programs, they could actually be outside or in work, and they had to be conducted with men or mixed gender groups, but the data needed to be presented separately for the men so we could get a bit of a sense of how it works for the men. But it didn't have to be specifically designed for men from the outset, and especially if you're doing a mixed gender group for a program. So we're looking, we weren't looking for really treatment programs, but rather we wanted to look at mental health promotion and prevention type programs. And so we excluded patient populations. Just, a brief run, using the PRISMA guidelines, just kind of working our way through. Cherise worked with a second research assistant to go through the search returns and we distilled down to 25 articles. It's interesting, this is from 2006 through 2016 inclusive, and 25 articles came from 10 different countries, including the US, Japan and Australia, but there wasn't a Canadian study represented there. And all the methodologies were included, and we ended up with 10 RCT, randomised control trials, 4 pre-post comparisons, and some qualitative studies in there as well. A variety of intervention strategies from yoga to online training modules were present. The majority of the studies had more than one focus, and stress was a common focus area. Cognitive behaviour therapy was also incorporated to many of the programs, and many outcome variables were examined, things like self-reported well-being, distress and mood, as well as even things like plasma cortisol and a measure of cognitive performance, self-control. So 22 of the 25 studies found significant positive changes in men's mental well-being, but really unable to determine what aspects of what interventions were most effective. Oftentimes with programs, it'd be like a before and after shot, a comparative shot, and you'll attribute, kind of benefit based on, outcomes. But the actual distinct piece of the program or the most important piece of the programs might not be able to be seen. And it's kind of a common thing that we see, I guess, in evaluation studies. It's interesting that the 3 that were not effective, so there were 3 of the 25 that were deemed not effective, were all workplace-based interventions. So we looked at these 9 workplace-based programs for promoting mental health, and I won't go through the range of those, but just to say, none of these workplace programs were tailored for men in terms of design or delivery. Those 5 did have male-only or male-dominated samples. So programs were designed to influence individual behaviours seem to have more impact than those that were created to go after organisational change. And I think, again, that might come back to the evaluation. And flexible and less demanding programs were viewed most favourably. Of these 25 studies, 5 included gender-sensitive programs, that we'd say, and meaning that they integrated gender-related influences, things like masculinities, masculine roles in the design and the delivery of male-specific programs in ways that recognised men's interests and preferences. So I won't belabour these, but I'll give you a quick overview. The Boot Room project, delivered mental fitness messages to men while they watched reruns of classic rugby games with former players featured in those games. The Building Healthy Men project was really a variation of the Men's Shed project, but targeted unemployed men with an aim to increase the wellbeing and employability. The Back of the Net program is a team-based exercises that were used to facilitate delivery of cognitive behaviour therapy strategies to men, football metaphors, things like that. And the Men's Stress Workshop, again, CBT, psychoeducation, and discussions of men's adherence to masculine norms. And the Mind Resilience program included football, gardening, drumming activities, along with CBT, psychoeducation. So all of the community-based samples, 2 of the 5, were focused on unemployed men in the community. But the ideas incorporated into these programs, could be helpful for thinking about, stress and resilience and how other programs might be rolled out. In terms of some promising strategies, there's a few things here really worth considering. Opportunities of all-male support, and I'd actually term it all-male mutual help rather than support, and reciprocity. So that idea that you would give and take in terms of advice and peer support. Activity based on workshop programs designed that are not perceived as therapy. So I think language again is really important here, and the name of the program being Heads Up I think is really important as well. It's kind of a positive, and we're not getting into mental illness or mental health per se. Not in the way the language is used anyway. And using sport to normalise the experience of discussing mental health. Lots of stories around resilience, embedded in some of the sporting metaphors that can appeal to me. In terms of considerations, I mentioned language, resilience, fitness and stress. I think, they're really what we call, dynamism language, and careful consideration of naming those as active. Gender is often about what people do, and specifically for men, I think it implies, a kind of a proactive, positive bent. And again, the Heads Up guys' naming, I think, was important in that. There's often been a bit of a dualism between, mind and body, and I think increasingly we're getting an understanding that we can talk to guys about capitalising on a mind-body connection, healthy mind, healthy body, and working the two and not being in isolation, and that the two talk to each other. So certainly leveraging in those ways was things that we picked up from previous programs. Workplace programs, I think they have to have a code of conduct to ensure participants, are not open to discrimination or injury participating. If you think about, guys, their identity oftentimes is very much wrapped up in what they do for a job. And I think there's already lots of job insecurity around, so we need to be especially clear that there's a safe place for engaging conversations that we might not normally have, and strategies that might be deemed outside of the ordinary. And finally, the use of multiple strategies and activities. Clearly men are not a homogenous group, and they won't have all the same interests. So the workplace programs that only involved one change to the workplace were not as effective as the more comprehensive programs that involved education and training, strategies for changing individual behaviours, along with supportive organisational and policy changes. I'll hand it over to Cherise to share the rest of this.
Thank you, John. So I'm going to pick it up here now with phase 2. We wanted to get input and recommendations from men working in male-dominated industries, as well as workplace representatives who really live and work in the North. I'm actually located in Prince George. I'm from Prince George, so I have the advantage of being here. And we wanted to not only look to the literature, as John has just covered, but also to real men, working in these industries and the workplace representatives, so we could make sure that the ideas we were coming up with would actually work in these industries. So we held 5 different consultation groups with 3 to 6 men in each in Prince George, British Columbia. These were 2 hours long, and the men were offered $40 for their time plus refreshments. We aim to recruit men from a variety of male-dominated industries, and we advertise through local news, email lists, word of mouth, that kind of thing. And then we also conducted one-on-one interviews with representatives from local male-dominated workplaces. Excuse me. These had to be managers or human resources personnel or individuals with some sort of health and safety role. And the interviews were about 30 minutes, and they were offered $50 for their health and wellness fund. Both the consultation groups and interviews were audio recorded and transcribed. In total, the 23 consultation group participants that we had were all men, although the workplace representatives included 3 women and 4 men. All of them completed demographics questionnaires that included questions about their age and employment. So we know we had a very diverse group of working men in the consultations from a variety of industries like forestry, construction, public service, transportation, information technology, automotive, and industrial sales. They included welders, mechanics, truck drivers, heavy equipment operators, workers from both sawmills and pulp mills, that sort of thing. And the interview participants were from transportation, chemical manufacturing, and forestry, and they included human resources personnel, managers and supervisors, and those with health and safety roles, as I said. And it's important to note, too, that the interviews and the consultation group participants were actually from different male-dominated workplaces. So we had these different perspectives of both employer and employee, but just keep in mind that they're actually not describing the same workplaces. They were all different. So we use thematic analysis in NVivo 10 to organize and describe our emerging themes. Our sessions all had a really different mix of men, the consultation groups did, and all were quite different despite having the common themes running through them. We based our themes on our research questions, which kind of formed the basis for the open-ended questions in the consultations and in the interviews. But there were a few themes that emerged during the sessions, and so those were incorporated. So we had this detailed coding framework, but we also allowed for other themes that we hadn't thought of to be incorporated into it. And the interviews were coded second, using that modified framework to include an examination for themes that came up in the consultation sessions. And for those of you who enjoy statistics, agreement was calculated in NVivo to be 97.79% with a Cohen's kappa of 0.64. And for those who don't enjoy statistics, Cohen's kappa basically corrects for chance agreement, and 0.64 can be considered kind of moderate to good. So we had 2 different trained coders, and we looked for agreement to make sure that we were reliably coding the same pieces of information into the same themes. So first to begin, we had a theme around workplace culture or context come up. Guys told us about how working in northern, primarily resource-driven industries could be really hard, how shift work and long hours left them feeling exhausted when they did have time off. As one consultation group participant described, most of it, though, is just the shifts. You're never home. All you see is work if you're not sleeping. So we really heard about challenges to work-life balance and stress or strain of working away from home for prolonged periods and how that, what that caused for family relations. And workplace representatives also recognize this challenge. Here's one saying, our drivers are, of course, out on the road from 9.5 to 13 hours a day. We are a 24-hour organization, right? We run 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So not really anything we didn't already know, but an important starting point to consider the workplace context here. So guys also told us about the stigma around mental illness. And there was agreement that in many male-dominated work environments, men were reluctant to talk about concerns for fear of showing signs of issues or appearing weak in front of male peers. As a 43-year-old sawmill worker explained, you're not manly if you have mental illness. We're the hunters, we're the gatherers, you know? There's a lot riding on our shoulders to be this strong man, and everything else is a sign of weakness, right? It's like a sick animal. The wolves are going to go after the sick one. It's just like that at work. Your coworkers, the wolves, are going to be going after that lame deer. So pretty powerful stuff, and really seeing a lot of concern around stigma in these, in the men in the consultation groups. But they also emphasized the importance of mental health. So the positive was that there could be some inroads potentially made, especially through ties to health and safety. So people really did think that it was an important topic and that it really tied into the safety of the workplace, and that there should be more of a focus here. We found that consultation group participants actually kept frequently shifting away from mental or emotional well-being to mental illness. And in fact, both men and workplace representatives told us that the term mental itself immediately produced a negative connotation and stigma. So as one construction worker here explained, when you say mental wellness, people automatically jump to disorder. So that was one of our major learnings, that, as John had mentioned, the naming of the program itself and the terms you use really set the flavor in people's mind right away. Workplace representatives also acknowledged their discomfort with the term mental and the topic area in general, saying, that is one topic where lots of people just don't feel comfortable with. I don't know what the best way to approach it is, really. So we also saw the same theme come through the workplace representative interviews around the topic of mental wellness and mental health, and a little bit of a discomfort around that and the stigma in the name itself. However, on the positive side, in the context of male-dominated work environments, it was viewed as acceptable to talk about stress, since, as one fellow said, everybody has stress in their life. So both workplace representatives and consultation group men described a variety of efforts to support mental well-being in their workplaces. Although not all of these were specifically tailored to men, these were some of the things that were happening already in workplaces. All 7 of the workplace representatives responded that they did have employee assistance programs, which include confidential telephone counseling administered by a third party. Other things they talked about, both the workplace reps and the consultation group men, were social events that were held at work, so things like barbecue lunches, or events held outside work, like Christmas parties, fishing, golf, or bowling tournaments. And these things were thought to provide a break from work, as well as an opportunity for workers to interact. And so those were identified as positive things that were already happening. All workplace representatives described policies in their workplaces to prevent bullying and harassment in accordance with WorkSafe BC policy, and tools to help employees deal with these issues. But interestingly, a theme around having human resources personnel who were really sincere came up. For example, in playing to the needs of men in her workplace, one safety administrator described her efforts to reach out to men on a regular basis, saying, every Thursday, I'm out there making sure that I'm talking to everybody because maybe they don't want to come in early or stay late to discuss things. So we're trying to make ourselves more present out in the field. So one strategy here for reaching men by getting out of the office and kind of coming to them. Other strategies were things that were linked to supporting mental well-being included safety meetings, awards and training and education, health and wellness bulletins, as well as friendly competitions and incentives, things like coffee mugs or jackets for a job well done. And finally, a variety of other strategies were identified that were more linked to physical well-being, so things like health screenings, flu vaccines, access to leisure facilities, or gym memberships, in addition to wellness days. And these things were mentioned by both men and workplace representatives. So those were some of the things already happening in the workplaces. But both the consultation group men and workplace representatives were also asked to provide feedback on several strategies that we came up with for supporting mental well-being in the workplace, as well as provide recommendations around what more could be done. And 4 main themes emerged in this regard. And the first of these 4 was reducing stigma. So both men and workplace representatives agreed that a starting point really needed to be reducing stigma. As one human resources director explained, I think the starting place needs to be that you need to look at some sort of program that eliminates the stigma around mental wellness. So men and workplace representatives collectively suggested that education, for example, during regular safety meetings, could held potential for reducing the stigma. And this could, using education could help address misinformation, perhaps providing information about the prevalence of illnesses like depression could sort of normalize mental illness a bit more. And showing the importance of mental health for workplace safety, drawing out that connection could be one way to help reduce stigma, they thought. There was concern amongst the group that without addressing the culture first, a program would not be well received, and engagement in voluntary programs would maybe even leave men who participated open to judgment and teasing by their peers, even if the program was focused on mental health as opposed to mental illness. So it really highlighted the need to find solutions that don't single people out. The second theme that came up, there were several suggestions to support well-being surrounding building teamwork and camaraderie. So the men pointed to apprenticeship programs in skilled trades where mentorship and men helping men are the norm. And men talked about random acts of kindness and a culture of helping one another without being asked, sort of having each other's backs. Saying, yeah, it's not like we're buying each other chocolates and flowers. It's more like that person is busy doing that and someone needs to do that. So okay, we'll make sure that gets done. Even in predominantly solitary work, like truck driving, men explained how they helped one another, kind of providing tips over the radio, like, you're going to need chains in this block, or heads up, there's bears over there, so don't wrap up there. So in the context of masculinity, just as competitiveness can exist amongst men, so can camaraderie and the mutual benefits of teamwork, aiding one another without a sense of debt. The third idea included suggestions around taking time for social activities. As one of the younger consultation group participants explained, yeah, 100%, I would say take the afternoon off, everyone is going bowling, is a million times better than, a speech once every 2 weeks. So ideally, they said this would be a paid time to enable and legitimize taking a break from work to build social cohesion and recharge. But if it was outside of work time, most were in agreement that including families would be a good thing, if possible. However, because of working long hours and working away from home, there must be supports in place to ensure men can actually participate. They did tell us that if you're just displaying posters encouraging men to spend time with family, similar to the top picture in this slide, that can actually elicit a negative reaction if the guys aren't able to spend time with their families, if they're working away from home for extended period of times, for example, then that would be inappropriate to suggest. The final idea that came up was ongoing support for mental wellness. So a consistent and ongoing focus on wellness and regular events, or something to look forward to, were highlighted as essential to supporting mental well-being, as opposed to sort of one-off type of activities. One consultation group participant described a scavenger hunt that happened only once, and kind of the need to do this sort of thing more regularly. Wellness days were highlighted as being a good thing, but consultation group men suggested that there were opportunities to do more of the smaller things throughout the year as well. Workplace representatives did recognize the need for more resources, explaining that there are few dedicated personnel to continually organize wellness activities. As one human resources manager explained, one of the biggest issues you're challenged with in this kind of stuff is that it gets run off the corner of somebody's desk. So again, that need for ongoing support. All in all, it was interesting that many of the recommendations were about doing rather than talking, sort of suggesting that positive mental health may be about actions rather than words for most men. So moving forward with the feedback from men and the available literature, we aim to develop this workplace mental wellness module for that larger POWERPLAY program. Our goal was to develop a program that was based on both evidence from the literature about strategies that support men's mental wellness, as well as the feedback we got from men who were actually working and living in Northern BC, who participated in our consultation groups. As John mentioned, there's an evidence-informed program called POWERPLAY that was created as part of a larger project grant. And today we're just talking about the creation of the mental wellness module for the POWERPLAY program. However, the POWERPLAY program also has physical activity, nutrition, and smoking cessation modules. And all the modules in POWERPLAY, including this new mental wellness module, have 3 components. They were actually initially based on the Canadian Cancer Society's Wellness Fits module in this Wellness Fits model in this way, that they have these 3 components. So the first component is educational materials, supporting men to gear up with tools for workplaces to share information about health and well-being. And the second component is opportunities to act. So in the form of what we call a challenge, meaning a friendly competition, to get everyone in the workplace doing some activity, providing an opportunity to kind of skill up, if you will, practice plays for better health. And then the third component is support. So working with employers to create supportive changes in organizational practice and policy to build up a positive and healthy working environment. And then the last thing I wanted to mention too is that although the whole program is tailored for men, the women working in the workplace can also engage in benefit from the program activities. So it's not exclusively for men. So the new module that we've developed is called Heads Up. And as I mentioned, this is all we're talking about today, is this module, the Heads Up module. Our idea was that this mental wellness module would be focused on positive well-being, so things that can support the well-being of all employees and change the workplace culture for the better. So it's not a treatment program, nor is it attempting to replace existing services. Instead, The module includes resources focused on promoting positive mental well-being for individuals. It also includes a challenge to help build teamwork and camaraderie. And then it has several suggestions for creating a supportive work environment. So next I'll go through some of the details of these, the things we've come up with. So some examples of key messages for the Heads Up module here, or those educational materials. There's things like top tips documents for employers to use. And these were designed to appeal to men. In this one, you can see perhaps a bit of humor being included because guys told us that they like humor. Designed to focus on things that matter to men, to be clear and direct, not text heavy. And they link to existing resources. There's a variety of messages to choose from stress reduction and building social connections to dealing with depression. All of them are evidence-based. So just a couple more additional messages here. These are the more serious ones, and you can see some of the links to existing resources and supports. So moving into opportunities to act, the Heads Up Challenge activity aims to promote a positive workplace culture by encouraging teamwork and building camaraderie. In this challenge, men are challenged to assist their coworkers or engage in random acts of kindness, and to recognize the efforts of fellow coworkers by recording them on a group tracking document. So by placing a puck in the net after they write what the act was on it. So a few examples are provided, things like shoveling snow off someone's car, buying coffees, switching shifts, or providing tips or resources to coworkers. So here the acts can be anonymous, and this challenge doesn't require men to sign up, to form teams, given the feedback we got in the consultations. So someone in the workplace leads the challenge. We call them the coach, and they may need to receive the acts by email, phone, or text. Employees could be invited to send a picture, for example, for those who are working off-site. And the coach might then add them to the tracking document on behalf of those employees and maybe take a picture of it to send out to everyone. So there's different ways of sharing the information if everybody's not located on one site. But the basic idea is that for a period of time, like 4 weeks, everybody's challenged to kind of help each other more than usual and write down what they're doing and sort of pass it on. So this idea of random acts of kindness. More educational resources here. The play of the week is designed to be distributed each week of the 4-week challenge, and each week issues there's key suggestions and activities. So this one takes a health and safety angle, incorporating mindfulness, but also humor. So there's 4 play of the week messages to correspond to the 4-week challenge. And there's flexible delivery options for these. So this one is a poster on the slide, but there's email, images, there's text, there's PowerPoint, and there's video that share the same message each week, that can be used to share the same message each week. We also showed these to men at the consultation sessions and asked them to comment on appearance and language, and so their feedback has been incorporated into them. So this challenge is designed to be 4 weeks, and there's a separate tracking document. So the workplace coach can record the number of pucks each week, for example, and send out a weekly summary to all employees, maybe with a picture, maybe some examples of what the acts were, just to share those out in case people might be working off-site. The workplace could also choose to offer an incentive, like set a group goal at the start and offer a reward if the goal is reached. So all employees maybe will get an hour of paid time for a potluck lunch, or to do something of their choice together as a workplace if they reach X number of goals, that kind of thing. Something fun to encourage participation. Finally, the last piece of the Heads Up module is the support component. And a few of the support recommendations included things like having dedicated personnel, like that coach, to support challenge logistics, things like distributing the resources, receiving and counting pucks and allocating prizes, things like that. Another suggestion for employers might be to hold a wellness day, and they can have different vendors from all sectors on site perhaps. Training and workshops, they could bring in an outside consultant to perform mandatory training with all employees, or hold regular monthly information sessions and require all employees to attend. Maybe feature a different topic each month, or send out employees to receive training, such as the Mental Health Commission of Canada's Mental Health First Aid course. Several policy and environmental recommendations for employers, things like encouraging healthy breaks when possible, flexible time policies, those sorts of things. In the Heads Up module, we provide some resources to help employers promote online self-assessments. So for example, headsupguys.ca is an online interactive website designed for men to promote self-health that John actually played a role in creating. And the site provides men with confidential access to a self-assessment tool, as well as strategies for managing and preventing depression. So just a little plug for that site here, as it's a great resource and it's free to use. And then other potential outside supports include employee assistance programs or employee family assistance programs, or the provincial bounce back program. So there's some of our resources that link to those things, make it easier for employers to promote them. And many employers are doing some of these things already, and it's really up to the individual employer as to what's feasible for them. But our aim was to kind of gather suggestions and examples of positive things that work well to share with employers for their consideration. So this is just a picture of what we call the Coaches Corner side of the POWERPLAY website. John showed you a screenshot of the homepage of the website initially. And this is the section of the website that requires a login. So this is for employers to access all the program resources, and all the tools necessary to run the Heads Up Challenge are housed here. So when an employer signs up to deliver the program, these materials are all available on the Coaches side of the POWERPLAY at Work website. So we know that investing in employee health and mental well-being in particular results in reduced absenteeism, improved productivity, and fewer disability claims. Some of those things that John talked about in the start of the presentation. And our goal is really to assist more employers in using POWERPLAY to create workplace environments where men support each other. So please do contact us if you're interested in learning more about the POWERPLAY program or more about the Heads Up module. And our emails are provided there on the slide. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for listening and take any questions.
Thanks, Therese. To our audience, if you have any questions at this time, please enter them into the question and answer box on the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll answer them out loud. A few questions that came in. If someone wanted to become involved in this study as a participant in the surveys, is that possible?
Good question. So we've concluded the consultation groups for now. We are still working with different workplaces, and we usually do before and after surveys. I don't know if, John, do you have any ongoing research right now?
No, but it would be terrific to have a wait list of folks that might be interested in feeding back, because these things are ongoing, and additional feedback or additional insights might be very helpful for us, even though we're not actively collecting data at the moment.
Okay, great. Another question. There was some mention of men feeling uncomfortable around the term mental health. Is there another term or phrase that we can use that might help people open up?
Well, the one term we definitely heard was stress, talking about stress management. And as John mentioned, a lot of people who even present with symptoms actually phrase it that way and talk about stress first. So guys seem to be comfortable with the term stress, saying kind of everybody has stress in their lives. So that's one. Do you know, John, of any others?
Yeah, I think in terms of guys often want to be doing something. So even foregrounding stress with the idea of managing stress or feeling stressed, those sorts of things. I think it opens up the conversation about a broader conversation about what's informing it and what's driving it, and also some strategies for overcoming it. And I remember at the focus groups, the couple that I was involved in, the guys were very, very good about talking about strategy. Like, they could talk to where their stress came from, but they shared a lot of strategies. So again, I think if we'd been talking about mental health, I don't think we would have got that conversation. lent itself to a bigger conversation about things that drive your stress and things that you can do to overcome it. So again, I just that doing language I think is important when we talk to guys, because mental health is kind of a passive and it is a label, you know.
Okay. In your research, was there any discussion about developing and promoting a supportive sexual harassment policy, a safe place for men to come forward and privately discuss power urges before acting on them in the workplace?
I didn't hear about it come up in the consultation groups, but John, do you have any background with this one?
No, I don't. I think it is an important consideration, I think, especially at the moment. And it's my sense of the question is it might not be something that's necessarily covered by workplace bullying. So it's probably not something we've got within POWERPLAY at the moment, and it sort of resides outside of the heads up piece. But to acknowledge it as an important and sensitive issue going forward about how we would create the safety, in gendered specific ways, I think is a really important emergent question for all workplaces.
Mm-hmm. And another question, are employers allowed to use variations of your marketing materials or promoting websites in their workplace?
That's another good question. The program is still, as John mentioned, kind of being developed and being optimized. We're still in the process of piloting it in other workplaces, and we are working with a couple different groups to look at ways to have it be continued to be offered. So looking at some health insurance providers, for example, who might want to take up the program. So at present, all the resources are kind of locked away in that Coach's Corner side of the website. So the best way would probably be just to contact us and have open some discussion around what you'd like to use it for, and we can see if we can make that work for you.
Okay, great. Has the program been specifically designed with the blue-collar worker in mind, or is the research indicated that this will be effective in all industries?
Definitely the blue-collar worker in mind, I would say, and in male-dominated industries, which at least in Canada tend to be resource-based industries, right? And so all the sites that we've pilot tested in so far have been male-dominated, and so our research on this particular program has shown effectiveness in those industries, not so much in the wider industries. However, that said, the program is evidence-based, right? So it is based on those systematic reviews of the literature. John talked about the one we did just for Heads Up, just for the mental wellness piece, but there were ones done for the physical activity and healthy eating and smoking cessation pieces as well. So in that regard, the program is based on strategies that are known to be effective on that wider level as well.
Okay, great. Can you talk a little bit more about your examples of what an employer can organize for a wellness day?
Yeah, so both the consultation group men and some of the workplace representatives talked about wellness days. I know they're common here in Prince George in the mills. Lots of the Canfor sawmills and pulp mills use them. And so they bring in people from all different sectors. So it can be safety people, it can be a representative who sells hard hats or steel-toe boots might be brought in. Often they might have health screening on site is another example. So you can offer people confidential blood pressure, blood sugar, glucose, cholesterol, that sort of thing. Because we know guys don't often get out to the doctor to find out where they're at with those types of things. So bringing somebody on site to do so can be helpful. And those are a little bit more the physical end of things. I know that the Mental Health Commission of Canada has some programs and training around mental well-being in particular, and so if that could be tied in, you could have somebody come in and maybe provide some on-site training around identifying symptoms in others, that sort of thing, and that's been shown to be effective. To have supervisors trained can be in how to respond and in how to pick up those types of things can be helpful. But in particular on a wellness day, other ideas are bringing in a nutritionist or bringing in a physical activity coach, sometimes local places like the YMCA or a local not-for-profit organization might be interested in coming out and talking. Providing the space and the time to hold something like that and having it be a bit flexible over a period of time so that people working different shifts might all be able to attend and take part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Looks like we have one last question. With first responders, in talking with them, they sometimes say it's not encouraged to discuss their feelings and often take their feelings home to family members. Is there a method to suggest for them to open up about this?
From my perspective, first responders, I think some of this work could really help in helping create the space for a changing culture and a conversation. My reticence, or not my reticence, my preference, I guess, a lot of times for first responders is that there's an element of professional kind of facilitation built into some of those conversations with people, because we risk re-injuring folks if they get into a space of retelling those stories without some kind of, not closure, but some kind of processing around the grief and injury and acknowledgement of the injury that's there. So some of those high trauma-prone industries, I think we need to augment a general program that's trying to raise a culture of being able to be open about feelings and experiences. I think we have to be especially careful in some of those occupations about providing some very clear facilitated services that would ensure the safety of the person going forward and the people around him or her.
Great. I think that's all for questions for now. Charisse and John, is there anything you'd like to add following your presentation?
Just a total side note that came up with that first responder question. We did have one fellow in the consultation who mentioned that truck drivers are actually an underrepresented group. When we always talk about those first responders and we talk about which different occupations that includes, truck drivers aren't the first one that come to mind, but he said, they're often the first ones on the scene. And so they're often the first ones there and who are exposed to kind of the similar things that first responders are exposed to. And there's fewer supports, right? Because people don't think of that. So just interesting, but I'd throw that out there. Mm-hmm. But go ahead, John.
No, that's a great point, Charisse. I totally agree. Sometimes not formally in a role where you're repeatedly exposed or thought to be, and but it's not to say those injuries don't occur. So I think it's a really, really key point. I was just going to give a shout out to say thank you for the opportunity to present this work, and and so glad that so many folks could join us online.
Absolutely, and our websites are both on the last slide here. On the POWERPLAY at Work website, there's a contact us form, and alternatively, our emails are on the slides. So if you're interested in being a participant and you want to put your name forward for when we're doing research again, definitely shoot me an email or go on our site and fill out the contact form. Or if you're interested in the program, same thing.
Great, and we'll include that on our materials follow-up materials to the audience, to you. So thank you so much, Charisse and John, for your presentation.